19th, we have a special 19th. I practiced that before the meeting too. I even checked. August 19th of a special meeting for the budget committee. So could we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Alrighty. Well, we're missing one member who's supposed to be here, but we were going to open up, I believe, with public input, just mainly because had we met on Thursday, you'd have an opportunity to weigh in. So I didn't want to deny anybody that opportunity by having a special meeting. So please, if you have any input that you'd like to say, come to the mic, state your name and your address, and we're happy to listen.
Marsha Finnegan, 147 Talent. Hi, how are you?
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I just want to say, I'm just here because of you guys are voting on this budget. And I'm hoping that you'll show support for the teachers. We've had such a high rate of people leaving the high school, and I think no contract is one of the reasons why. So they need a contract. Very unhappy, and that's why they're leaving. Well, not just that. There are other reasons, but that's all I wanted to say.
I appreciate your
Please
feedback.
consider it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen Falls, 8 Mike Lane. I'm also here to ask the budget committee to vote in favor of supporting the teacher's contract. I think as the budget committee, this contract is reasonable for you. I know your job isn't to promote the school, but it is to look at the budgetary balance for the town. It cut the cost that you wanted. It meets the healthcare requirement that you guys wanted. And whether I know one of the discussions was whether or not you supported a special election, but that's in the judge's hand. Your vote is, as you have said, just whether or not this is better for the town. I think if you wait until March, then the teachers are all another year behind in their steps. So we're going to be, or I shouldn't say we, but realistically, they should be receiving that makeup step or trying to close that gap from the other 3 years that were also already skipped. And so by approving this budget and supporting it, then you're preventing that fallback, which means it's less of a cascade effect for March. It's going to be better long-term. We'll have a budget under the belt, which is better for the district as a whole and less negotiating for the budget committee rather than going through a whole nother round. So tax-wise, it's a better presentation than I think what would come in March, because I would expect a bigger tax impact if you have to go through the negotiating round again. So I think all around, this is something that the budget committee, it meets all of your criteria. And so it makes sense that you support it. So hopefully you're all able to do that. So that if it does go forward on a warrant article, then the town can see that there is a benefit to supporting it.
Thank you very much. Just in case anybody just walks in. See, it always works. Wait long enough.
So I saw a post on Tara Hirschberger, Natticook Ave. I saw a post on Facebook from Cindy Couture, who, for anybody watching, was part of the budget committee the last time around, and when it did not get the recommendation to vote, and her comment was that the negotiation had addressed everything she thought was preventing the budget committee recommendation in the past. And she would hope that the budget committee supports the new teacher contract. So I just wanted to make sure, I know everybody votes how they want, but I think that that's a strong endorsement. Thank you.
Rhonda Landrow, 5 Josiah Drive. Again, I'm just here in support of all the work that's being done and the negotiations at the tables. And again, I urge you to vote on the contract so the teachers could have a contract and their morale going into the start of the year, and so forth. So I just want you to vote on the contract so they can have a contract and we can retain the good teachers that we do have and attract some more teachers to the town.
Thank you.
Susan Seabrook, 33 Jamesway Drive. I just want to point out to the public in general that when people move into this town, probably one of the things that they first look at is the school system. I know when we moved here 28 years ago, my husband and I looked into that very seriously. Our real estate values are dependent upon our schools. Crime, if we have good schools, the crime rates probably come down as well. This is a fair contract. The teachers have negotiated many hours to come up with what the budget committee asked for last time, and I just hope that you support this. Thank you.
Last call. All right, so then we'll move into the budget committee discussion and proposed vote. So, is there I guess we start with a motion or to discuss? Oh, actually, there were some questions we had. There were some questions that were posed to the school board relative to, that came from one of the budget committee members. So just so that people know, we do have some new members on this, sitting here at the table with us, and not everybody was involved in the original contract vote. And as such, that when we had the presentation in June, I think there was an assumption that a lot of people here understood what the original proposal was, and that may not necessarily been the case. And so I forwarded some questions to the school board relative to some clarifications, mostly I believe in regards to the longevity payments, and I was hoping we could have some feedback prior to the vote.
Yeah, do you want to take those one by one?
Sure. Yeah. I don't remember off the top. I sent them off. So one had, absolutely, if you would please approach.
So the first question that we looked at was how are longevity payments provided?
Mhm.
And so I just want to kind of, maybe I can actually answer all of these by sort of explaining the process of what happens. So our salary scale is 15 steps. And you can think of a step as kind of a year, as long as a person received adequate evaluation and is getting the job done, then they would advance on a step. That's not entirely true because in the past there have been missteps. So we have many teachers who are behind. You know, they may have been in the district for 10 years, but are on step 6 or 7 because they've been held back. But generally, think of a step as a year that a person advances along their career. And once they hit the top step, that is the salary. They're frozen at that. That's sort of the ceiling salary. But there is a longevity payment that gets added into that. And the criteria is that a person has to hit the top step 15 and have been in Litchfield for 5 years. So if we hired a teacher with, say, 13 years experience on step 13, they go 13, 14, 15. So 3 years in, they're at that top step, but they don't get longevity until they hit mythically step 17, right? Because then it would be the 2 more years in order to earn that longevity step at that point. Okay, so if that makes sense. And so at that top step, we then add in the longevity payment of $1,500 to a person's base salary. That's calculated in as part of that base, so they're paid out that $1,500 over 24 payments.
26 or 21, pending what they choose for
That's right, 'cause
their payments.
they can choose. And so then it's calculated and they get paid. So it's not a lump sum that's received later as part of their base salary.
Okay.
And so the answer is obviously there's not an interest-bearing account where all this money is held until later. It's just sort of part of the way the cash flow from the town to the school district goes. I think we hit all the questions with that explanation.
I
So
believe so. Unless anybody had any other questions that they'd like clarified prior to. just, and again, a lot of it is just, not everybody here has been involved, so for some people, it's the first time even seeing a contract. So we want to make sure they're comfortable voting on the contract. So having any questions addressed, as they would have had we moved this along to March.
And, keep in mind that the renegotiated agreement is $250,000 less expensive than what the voters did not accept back in March. So we trimmed 23.35% of the cost out of it. And one of the major scale backs was on the longevity payment. So there was an increase to longevity so that our teachers who hit that top step would be recognized for that experience in the system. In the new agreement that you're voting on tonight, there's no adjustment to the longevity. It's current language for year 1 and year 2. And then in year 3, it would go up by $90, which again, if you do 90 over 20,
26 or 21 pays.
it's not a huge increase, but it does recognize those teachers who are at that step.
So I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, going back to 2017-18 and an 18-19 contract, there was a salary adjustment where step 2 became step 1. Am I right on that?
So that predates me a little bit, but
I
Holly can,
believe at that point, that's how we
There was a salary adjustment because we were behind as a district compared to other districts.
yeah, that was, so what we would have done, we would have gotten rid of like the old step 1 and kind of moved everybody down. So someone starting would have started at a higher
Right, so
rate of
if you were at step 2, that became step 3, essentially.
They didn't move numbers. They just got the salary increase.
Right, I understand, but there would be two jumps in that first year of the 2017-18 contract, if I'm looking at it correctly, because of the adjustment, the salary adjustment. I have it on the, laptop if you need to refer to it, but
Pull up the
so
contract.
actually, I saw Nate come in. Can you help with that question? Because you probably better understand the way it.
Yeah, so they're, okay.
Absolutely, come on up.
Nate is a former president and was here at the time that occurred, so.
Will you pull up the contract? Because it's.
well, I'm glad I opened the door for you.
I know.
Do you want me to move over here?
Whatever works, just so the public can hear me, I guess. And I haven't looked at the contract in a little while, so to the best of my recollection, there were some years in which that schedule moved and an individual was stuck on the same, or I shouldn't say stuck, but they'd stay at that same number. So you're correct in saying that someone may move, the schedule would move, but they'd
Right.
stay at the same step. So I think it's a semantics.
Right, but the salary would increase.
Yes, correct.
2 levels.
The person would not be moving as well. I believe the only year in the contract in which someone literally moved up from one step to the next, if I'm correct in my recollection, would have been the last year of the previous agreement. So there weren't going to be any years in which someone was going to receive new monies into the salary schedule and move as well on there. Having been the association president and negotiating, I can't imagine the school board would have come to an agreement like that. And I don't know that the budget committee would have been really supportive of that. Again, that is to the best of my recollection. I don't believe there was going to be a year in which someone went up on the schedule and got new money. So again.
Yeah, so it was my understanding that the 2 became step number 1. Step number 1 went away.
Yes, yeah.
So 2 moved down to number 1 at that
Yes.
level of step
Correct.
2.
Yep. So, we went back and forth with, not Dr. Jetty, but the previous superintendent and the previous legal counsel. We had disagreements on how to use the word step. I think he was in the same way of interpreting that information where he was essentially calling it a step. We were much more narrow in how we talked about a step. We just talked about a step moving from step 1 to step 2. He probably, like you was saying, even if the salary schedule moved and you stayed on the same step, he was saying that was a step. And I think that language that they insisted the previous school board negotiations committee had wanted that particular language in there. So it was a semantics difference between the association and the school board at the time. So I think your language captures the viewpoint of the legal counsel and the previous school board. So I think it was just a sort of difference of opinion on what you want to call a step. But I hope that helps.
Well, it helps. What I want to do is to get it up here.
Sure.
And you can certainly entertain other questions.
Am I correct?
So in 17-18, we changed the grid,
Right. But
the numbers on the grid, but teachers did not get a step.
no.
Which is
Right.
part of the reason why we have people that are 3 and 4 steps behind.
Right.
Because
They
we
were
get,
frozen on the step at that point. So even though the grid adjusted, people didn't move
They didn't
along.
advance one step, right?
correct.
And any.
It was just a salary adjustment, basically.
Correct.
Yes.
And
So-
if I heard the question right, the idea, because it almost sounds like there's a.
Like a double
Some
dip.
people doubled.
Yes,
yeah, they
correct.
doubled, when in fact, if that had been the
No.
case, we wouldn't have people that are 3 and 4
No.
behind.
Yeah, so I mean, that is the schedule right there. just
Yeah.
to- If that looks familiar.
So yeah, because I think that was a concern when we heard from our members was they're sort of saying, well, I'm sort of losing a step again. And so the school district's response essentially was, no, you're not losing a step. We're giving you a step. But again, I think it's that difference in
Right.
what you call a step versus what a teacher might consider a step. So
Yeah, so if they didn't double dip, then my observation is that the previous contract, 17, 18, 19,
Yep.
was valued at 575,662. So the average per year is 287,831. The proposed contract, 854,737. If you do the average there over the 3 years, that's 284,912.
Mhm.
So it's essentially a little bit less
Mhm.
on the average per year.
and that even may be, I'm correct in saying, I think it's traditional that on those warrant articles, is there a breakdown usually on the year-to-year increases? too?
Well, not the tax impact, but the amount
Yeah.
anticipated, projected, because it's subjective
Correct,
to
yeah.
health
Healthcare costs,
insurance and
Yep.
how much more we have to
So-
pay for retirement
Yeah,
and all
sure.
that other fun stuff.
So I
Potential payroll cuts. Who knows?
hope that helps.
It does, thank you.
All right, are there any other questions or clarifications that people would like to request?
Carrie, if I could just clarify on the longevity, because again, we live it, so we understand it. I just want it to be clear that it's not a compounded longevity, so we're not adding 1,500 each. You're
Just
not
remains
adding onto
1,500.
it, right? It's just the 1,500 added to whatever that step is,
The
right?
only
So,
increase would be every year that step 15 increases slightly.
right, so if there's a cost of living adjustment to 15, a teacher would get that, and then they would
Then
have the
the
1,500 on top. But they're not saying 1,500 for
Then 3,000.
15,
and 4,000.
another 1,500 for 16, another, no. That's not the way this is. They're not adding up 1,500s. It's whatever cost of living adjustment is made plus the 1,500.
So
Until you
you-
hit, I guess it's 20 years, and then it goes up to 2,500. So it does recognize, and that's where it caps.
All right, so when they're capped out, they do get a COLA and they, right?
Only if it's negotiated. So in this case, there are the COLAs. There's the 1%, 1.5, 1.75 over the 3 years.
But they would get that as well.
They would get that, and then that longevity added in.
Just be agreed upon step 15.
Correct.
Whatever.
Yep.
I had some members of the public had asked me, we're kind of confused about like why the budget committee was voting today. And Dr. Jetty, you had sent us the email that kind of clarified that. So I was wondering if you could just say that, just so it's in the public record, so people know kind of what the discussion was.
Absolutely. So basically, when we went to court, we've never done this before, right? So we've never gone to court. We didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if the judge was going to hit the gavel and say denied or granted. We just didn't know. And what he said was, I'll expedite this. And then there was a member of the public who was there who said, can you tell me what expedited means? And he said, normally it's 60 days. This time I'll try to get it done in 30. And I immediately looked at our attorney like, we don't have 30 days. Like our timeline that is in front of the judge is tighter than that, right? So we regrouped after and said, then what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to proceed as if it's been granted. And then if it's denied, we'll just stop. But at this point, we have to proceed with the timeline that we laid out. And the timeline was off an October 1st vote. And then you have to have deliberative 28 days prior to that, which brings us to September 3rd. So there's the date that we need to have our deliberative. And then you have to post a warrant 14 clear days prior, which brings us to August 20th, tomorrow. We have to post a warrant tomorrow. So originally, because I've seen the budget committee vote following deliberative. So I was like, oh, you'll be fine. You can vote after deliberative, right? And then we'll just make sure it's on the warrant that goes to the voters. At which point the attorney said, no. The budget committee by law can only vote at deliberative if it changes at deliberative. So if an article changes at deliberative, then you can re-vote on it so that your recommendation is for the valid warrant article.
Right.
This is a collective bargaining agreement. It can't change at deliberative. There's nothing that the public can do at deliberative with a collective bargaining agreement. So therefore, they said the budget committee has to vote prior to the posting of the warrant on the 20th, which brings us here to the 19th. And so we held a board meeting today where the board voted. Michelle, what was the outcome of the vote? 5-0, the board will recommend to the voters to support this article. And then it brings us to this meeting tonight. So I apologize. I'm a little bit new to some of these little nuances, and then doing it in August is another twist on top of it all. But either way, I appreciate that the budget committee came together to get a vote for the public. And now we're past the hearing date. It's in the judge's hands. They'll either approve it or not, and we'll plug ahead from there. So I hope, does that
Yes,
answer
that was great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think sometimes it can just be hard for people to understand all the little nuances and why it's going that way. And just, I think on both sides, we're all just trying to do this on the up and up.
Good point. So for those who are expecting Thursday, sorry. So, anything else? All right, so is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept warrant article 1,
Recommend.
recommend article 1 for the special election.
Been made, is there a second?
Second.
Made and seconded. All right, so is there any other discussion that anybody wants to make towards it?
And just so we're clear, this is just
This-
voting on
we
the
are-
contract.
Only voting on whether it's a financially responsible contract. And I do think that it was important to move the vote to tonight for that purpose, because had it been earlier and a lot of people were equating a vote in support of the contract as a vote in favor of the special election. And those to me are two incredibly different situations, because I can tell you my opinion on one is not exactly the same as the other. And so if I had been forced, I can tell you right now, if I had been forced to make that vote earlier in the month, it would not have been a favorable one. Because I am one of those people who do not appreciate the process as it's been laid out. That said, my vote tonight is on whether or not it's a financially responsible agreement. And I do appreciate the fact that the LEA and the school board was able to come together and address the concerns that were presented by the budget committee. I do appreciate that. I'm having been involved in negotiations, I'm guaranteed it was not easy. It was not fun. And there are a lot of other things we would rather have done during the summer. So I appreciate the effort that was put into it and to help support the teachers. I do appreciate that there was a lot of give. And so from that perspective, and I really wish we had seen this agreement in March, because I don't think we would be here tonight, quite frankly. So
Madam Chairman, I would just like to make a note for comment, right?
Yep,
Where I
absolutely.
echo the sentiments made during public input, right? Looking at the contract specifically, I think it's fair and equitable for the town. Our teachers, you can debate the union, right?
Mhm.
We're not here to debate that,
Nope.
right? We are here to specifically look at, is this a good value for the town?
Yep.
Right? And, I hope that we're able to really compartmentalize that in today's vote and really specifically look at that and put it the other side.
absolutely. So when we walk away, though, I do want to understand it's a vote on the financial aspect of it. So if you have any other concerns, that I would probably ask that you set those aside. It's really, is this a vote? Is this contract something that it does bring value to the taxpayers and that we can support from a financial standpoint? So we have a motion and a second. So I was hoping we'd have cute little nameplates, but we don't have them for this meeting. So I will ask for people when you vote to raise your hand so that people can associate their name and the face. Well, at least the face and the hand. So All the, hand in the face,
Hand
yeah.
in the face. Better than pie in the face.
That's right. So all those in favor of recommending this proposed teacher's contract, should the warrant be approved by the judge for a special election, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
And there should be no abstentions because that evens us out. 6-2-0, yep. All right, so that addresses the one item on the agenda, the discussion and the vote, so then we can move into back to the public input. Because again, while it's a short meeting, had we had the Thursday meeting, you could state your opinion after the vote. And so I would like to still extend that opportunity to you.
I'm gonna hop over there.
This is clear because now we know that you're as a citizen and not as a,
Yeah.
very distinct.
So Jen Burke, 1 Westview Drive. I would just say I think it's disappointing that the Board of Selectmen didn't support this. So understanding that you represent the Board of Selectmen, I think that it's very disappointing to hear. So just want to go on record to say that.
Susan Seabrook, 33 James Way. I don't know if this is permitted, but I would like to know, there were 2 negative votes, and I'd like to know why you voted against it, if you wouldn't mind expressing it. And I don't know your name, sir.
Brian Hodgkins,
Okay. If you could explain why, just so we can learn from this experience.
just from the financial.
I can't
When
hear
I'm
you.
looking at the amount it's gonna, looking at the amount it costs taxpayers, I don't agree with it. That's why I
The
voted no.
contract itself.
Yes.
I would echo that. The people that I've talked to, and I talked to a lot of the old timers in town, and they just, on top of the $4 million for the fire station, throwing this up there, another $1 million. I have a lot of people just said they can't afford it. And we're going to start driving people out of town. People have been here for generations, and that concerns me. Nothing against the teachers. I have 4 generations of teachers in my family in this town. We've gone to school here since town was founded, so it's not against the teachers.
Okay, thank you.
Christina Harrison, 95 Pinecrest. I just want to say that as one of the negotiating team members from the school board, it is very disappointing that we spent hours and hours and hours and did not get a 9-0 vote. I understand that it is a cost to the taxpayer. So I wanted to ask, was there a dollar amount that would have been acceptable to you? Or is it that it has a tax impact? Because I look behind me at the people whose livelihoods we're deciding here. And I'm sure they want to know what they're worth.
I'm not deciding anybody's livelihood. You're simply asking me, and this is not, I don't know how you put, like, we're not supposed to put our feelings into this or anything like that. The teachers have come up here on many occasions, expressed how it is for them, and if we don't vote for it, we're voting against teachers. That's just not the case. And basically, the town said no originally. You came back, you did some renegotiating. I still don't think, to me, the number is too high. When you look at the year-over-year cost to the taxpayers of this town, it's putting us out of this town. I mean, when you say, when you guys are saying now, if you don't have good teachers, you're going to have bad or poor property values. I'm not looking to move, and a lot of people here aren't. They're looking to stay in this town. So your property value, I'm not trying to sell. So it's not an argument that I really heard. I mean, I heard it, but I just don't agree with
So
it.
what would be the dollar amount that
I
would
don't
be
have a set
acceptable
dollar
to you?
amount right now, but I looked at the overall cost of that contract, and you're looking at over $300 in 3 years. I just don't think that's reasonable to raise people's taxes. That's just on a $350,000 house. It's a lot more for people who have houses in this town that are worth more. And people say, if you live in Litchfield, you should be able to afford it. Well, you don't know what people's situation is in this town. A lot of people live paycheck to paycheck, and you add a lot more money on that tax bill. It puts people, they can't live in a town they grew up in.
I understand. I think we have a lot of teachers who also live paycheck to paycheck, and I know they know I support them. And it's worth it to me to pay that $300 and knowing that our students and all of our children are going to get a quality education. So that's all I have to say.
Good evening. I'm Margaret Norton. I live at 24 Woodhawk Way, and it is really sad that you couldn't all decide. And I know we're talking about teachers, but I think we're forgetting about someone else who's just as important, and that's the kids. I have 2 kids in the school department right now. One's in middle school. My son's going to be graduating this year. I've had kids at my house the last few weeks, both age groups, devastated over what's been going on in the town with the education. What's really impactful is listening to a group of kids who are going to be graduating and listening how this has impacted them. So $300 a year, it's peanuts.
What are
And I
those kids
know-
going to do in college? Are they going to have the same
Well,
teachers in
because
college?
it kind of so a lot of the conversation this weekend at my house was AP classes, and a lot of these colleges that they're applying for require it. When we take away teachers who have that experience and you bring in new teachers who are just starting out of it, you need to at least get a 4 or 5 on those AP exams to be able to count in colleges. It's been shown in research that teachers who start teaching these AP exams, and they're newer, their kids don't seem to score as high because they don't have the background. When we keep replacing teachers, we lose it at the high school level. We lose the recommendations they need. They have to go searching now teachers to give recommendations. It's a huge impact on the high school level. I sat there this weekend listening to 8 boys who are graduating, who were just going through their minds and just talking at a table about how this impacts them. So
Did they talk
$300,
about how would it impact the taxpayer?
it would impact me, and I would gladly pay it. I've been here
Well,
a
you
long
would.
time.
There's a lot
Everyone
of people.
I've spoken to would also
a lot of people
gladly
I've
pay it.
spoken to wouldn't.
Yeah, we don't need to argue that, but my point is.
You are arguing that. You're the one that brought it up.
Be able to take that argument to the ballot box?
My point is, it does have an impact on the kids as well.
I appreciate your statements, and the rest of the verbal sparring we can say for should the judge approve it.
Thank you so much.
Secretary of State, Catherine Falls, 8 McLean. I am also disappointed that 2 of our members did not support it, given that this is, I think, a very financially responsible offer. I understand that there is obviously a wide range of people who live in Litchfield, and I have often spoken on the side of moderation, being careful and taking into account everyone in this town. And I am absolutely certain that there are elderly people who are living on Social Security, and as the taxes go up in this town, then it's hard. But the selectmen gave the fire chief $5,000 raise, and that was okay. We have a very large fire station out there, then that was okay. The police contract passed, and that's got a big tax impact. So I hope, as a budget committee member,
You're looking at me. I voted against
no,
those.
I've scanned the whole. I went from one end down to the other.
Oh, I voted against those as well.
So, I mean, at some point, there is moderation, but there's also a point of maintenance. And in order to maintain a valuable school system, you have to give some sort of raise, benefits, things like that to your employees. And this contract was very much a negotiation between what the budget committee wanted for years. Budget committees that pre-existed most of you, I think, came out and said, this is where we want to go. And the union negotiated under good faith of what the budget committee wanted. So I think the fact that what was stated by the budget committee as a goal, the union then negotiated and met that goal, I think that is unfortunate that you then didn't support it.
Thank you.
Sorry. Hi, Caitlin Fallis, 8 Mike Lane. I would just like to say, I mean, I don't know a lot about the money and all that, but as a student, I have lost a few good teachers who have done a lot for me personally and other people that I know. And I mean, I've had my share of good teachers and bad teachers and nurses and all that. But I would just like to say that, you know, I think that they deserve to have the money and all that to support themselves so that they can then be good teachers and support us, because as, you know, students, we need good teachers to help us and everything. And I'm very much afraid of losing more teachers who are very good to me and good to other students. So I just, you know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody want to follow that? Because that's
I just want to say one more thing. I didn't mean to imply that I was disappointed in the way that the budget committee voted. I was disappointed it wasn't a 9-0 vote, but I am
We're
very,
gonna get 9-0 anyway. We only have 8 people.
oh, true. Well, 8-0, but I am very thankful and appreciative of your flexibility this summer. I know it's been kind of a whirlwind, and I wholeheartedly appreciate your support of the school board and the LEA in your vote tonight to recommend the article. So thank you very much.
With that, Madam Chairman, and I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Anybody else want to speak before we accept the motion to adjourn? All right, is there a second?
Yep.
All right, made and second. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? You get speed up. All right, and
Next meeting, August
the
21st.
next meeting will be our regularly scheduled meeting of this Thursday. This Thursday. Third time this month.
Thursday.